Welcome to Cooking for Kidney Health, where we teach you how to make delicious kidney-friendly recipes in your very own kitchen. On this episode, Chef Brittney Gage of Chef's Kitchen prepares some great fall classics including pork chops with cranberry sauce, glazed carrots, cauliflower au gratin, and a spiced apple cake. Afterwards, renal dietitian Cassie Erbig stops by to explain the nutritional benefits of this dish. Let's eat.
All right, so with any meal, you always want to time out everything that you can. And since the cake takes at least 25 to 30 minutes to bake, we're going to go ahead and start doing that first. I've already diced up some apples and tossed them in our spices, which are cinnamon, clove, ginger, and nutmeg. So I like to toss the apples with it just because it coats them and it gets them really nice and spiced up. And when you bite into that cake, you get the spiced apple and it's just, explosion in your mouth. The recipe on the back of the box says that you can use egg whites only, but I like to use whole eggs just because that egg yolk does give it a little bit more body and luxuriousness to it. So we're going to crack those eggs in there. And then sometimes people will just, throw their eggs, water, and dry mix in and mix it all up. But the better thing to do is to mix your eggs with your oil first, because that creates a nice cohesive homogenization of those, and it just makes the cake a bit more fluffy. So you're going to slowly drizzle this in, and you can do it with a whisk. I just have a spatula here. I didn't see a whisk, so spatula is just perfectly fine. Wooden spoon, whatever you got. Add that, and then we're going to get our third of a cup or 1 cup of water. And actually the recipe says to only do half a cup of water. So perfect. I'm really good at eyeballing things. So then we've got our cake mix. And this is just super simple. Cake mixes, there's nothing wrong with cake mix. I make everything that I do from scratch, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, if you need to grab a box mix, it's literally just the dry ingredients. You're adding all the other stuff that you need. Stir that together, and then we're going to fold in our apples after we mix this, throw it in our 9 by 13 inch pan, bake it in the oven while we move on to our pork chops and veggies. Okay, so your dough is going to be, or your batter is going to be a little bit thicker because the recipe states to only use half of the water that the box mix calls for. And part of that reason is because the apples will give it moisture as they cook. They're going to release a lot of moisture, so you don't want that extra moisture that the box mix says to use. Oh, those apples smell so good already. So it really is chock full of apples. It's more kind of a cross between like an apple cobbler type dessert and cakiness. So you see everything's mixed in pretty good. It's okay if you have a little bit of lumps. That's all okay. It's going to even out once it bakes. And then we have our pan right here. Spread that in. It smells delicious already. And this is a sugar-free cake mix, but you have got so many spices in here, it's going to taste so good. The apples are going to be naturally sweet. Who doesn't love a fall apple recipe, right? It's actually one of my favorites, is apple pie. All right, so we've got all that evened out. We're going to go ahead and throw this in the oven for about 20 minutes. So now that we've got the apple cake in the oven. We're gonna go ahead and get our carrots out of the boiling water. So the carrots you want to peel, wash, and then cut to whatever size that you'd like. You can keep them whole if you'd like and keep the stem on for, make it a little bit fancier. But we've done just small portions so that way it cooks quicker and it's easier for you all to eat. So let's see where that was, right here. So we're going to test one of these carrots first to see how much it's cooked. And it's not falling off the knife yet, so I want to cook it for just a little bit more. We'll test another one just in case. Yep, not falling quite yet, right? So we'll add a few more minutes to that, and we'll set this off to the side. The cauliflower, okay, so this is really, really easy. Cauliflower, you just trim up, put it in your pan, and then we're going to drizzle a little bit of, I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on here just to get it a little bit of moisture to collect that breadcrumb and Parmesan. So just a tiniest touch of olive oil. And then let's see, about 3/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese. And hey, if you like it cheesier, by all means, right? And I usually like to use the shredded cheddar, but we've got the grated here today, which is perfectly fine. That's just going to brown a little bit quicker, so we're going to want to check on this before the amount of time that calls for on the recipe. You can always bake more, but you can't bake less, right? And then breadcrumbs, we got seasoned breadcrumbs. We'll do 1/4 of a cup of that. Just right on top. Oh, it smells good. They're seasoned with Italian spices and herbs. All right. There's that. And let's put a little bit more color on there and do some black pepper. Now you notice a lot of these recipes don't contain salt because salt is not great for the kidney. If you've got kidney disease or you're just trying to eat better for your kidney health, you want to stay away from potassium, phosphorus, iodine, prepackaged foods. They've got a lot of that in there. So this we're going to just set off to the side. We're going to throw it in the oven for about 15 minutes. So about halfway through the cake baking, we're going to throw this on the top shelf so it gets a nice brown on top. Cake is baking, our carrots are finishing up. We're going to sear our pork chops. Get that out of the cooler. So today we've got some boneless, thin pork chops. These are great. They're going to sear up in 5 minutes probably, and then we're going to add them back to our pan with our cranberry sauce to finish cooking. All right, so we get our nice big skillet right here. Get this out of the way. So you always want to preheat your skillets when you're searing anything. Get that nice crust on the meat. So I'm going to put it about medium high and let it come to heat. But in the meantime, we will season the pork with the black pepper. And that cranberry sauce is going to lend a really, really nice flavor to this pork once it's done. The pork, the cranberry will be, it'll be nice and tart, and the carrots will be sweet, and the cauliflower will have a little bit of a crunch. So you want to have that balance of textures and flavors. All right, I think that's good on that pepper. And then we've got olive oil to sear the pork chops in. Now, the recipe says to coat the pan in nonstick spray, But I feel like the items and ingredients that are in nonstick cooking spray, I prefer to use natural oils. And if you're doing olive oil, make sure you're not using extra virgin olive oil, because that has not a high smoke point, so it could burn before you even get anything in your pan. I always just put my hand a little bit above, see if I can feel the heat, and I can definitely feel it. So we're going to go ahead and turn that down a little bit, just to medium, and then pour maybe a tablespoon or two into the pan. Kind of shake that around. And you can tell when your oil is hot and ready because it'll ripple. It might be hard for everyone to see if I tilt it, but it should by no means start to smoke. That's what you know it's way too hot and that you want to bring it off the heat before putting your meat in the pan. But this looks and feels perfect. So we're going to go ahead and put our chops in. Just a small sizzle. I'm going to turn it back up just a little bit. And you don't want to overcrowd your pan, because then your meat is just going to steam. You want plenty of space for your meat when you're searing it. So that's why I have this nice larger skillet, and I've got 4 pieces on the outside and then a nice piece in the center, and that size pan is perfect for this size pork chops. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. So anytime I'm searing meat, you want to put it in the pan and leave it alone. You know, don't move it around, don't check and see, because that's just going to prevent you from getting a really, really nice sear, which is searing the meat in the oil. There is something called the Maillard reaction. It's spelled like a Maillard duck. It's when the proteins and sugars inside caramelize, and it creates these little brown bits at the bottom of the pan. Do you ever see those when you're cooking? Those are flavored gold mines. So you don't want to get rid of those. You want to keep them. And then you deglaze the pan and you get all those brown bits mixed up in it, and it develops this really, really good caramelized flavor that's perfect. I see them a little bit jumping, so I think it might be time to turn. I am going to season the other side of the pork chops, though, with that black pepper. There. We've got some browning, but not as much as I would like. So I'm going to let it sit on that side for just a little bit longer. It won't hurt anything. But in the meantime, we will check our carrots to see how they are doing. Oh, wait, I used that. Don't want to use that same knife because that's what I opened the pork with. So now it's not falling off, but I could easily break it, you see? So we're going to go ahead and take those out, because later we're going to make a glaze for them and finish them in the glaze. So you don't want them to be so mushy that they break apart completely when you're putting them in that glaze. Just gonna take these out. The pork chop is smelling delicious, making me hungry. I know you were all hungry. Now, the cranberry sauce for the pork chops, we're going to make in the same pan, so that way we can get all those nice brown bits up off the bottom, and that'll incorporate that flavor into the cranberry sauce itself. All right, so we've got our carrots. I'm going to go ahead and empty that. And we're going to utilize the same exact pan to make the glaze for the carrots. And then we're going to put the carrots just right back in the pan, so less dishes, right? Now these are looking pretty good. You can see they're kind of starting to curl, so that's a good sign that they're ready to flip. So like the nice caramelization on the meat. Let that cook for about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then we're going to take the pork chops off the heat. And then we're going to start making the sauce for the pork chops in the same pan. Pan to put these once they're done. And our cake has about 5 minutes left, or no, not the cake. Yeah, Yeah, the cake has 15 minutes left. Watches, you know, sometimes the smart watches are smarter than myself. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we're making today? Well, perfect. You guys already know. So since these are a little bit on the thinner side, I'm not going to cook them for the full 5 minutes because they're getting nice and brown already. These ones are quite thin, so we don't want to overcook them. So I'm actually going to take them off now. Keep that right there. Keep that oil and those brown bits in there. So I have 2 teaspoons of cornstarch in the pan. And you don't want to mix your cornstarch with your liquid ahead of time because cornstarch is a non-Newtonian type of material where if you let it sit, it's just going to be globby and difficult to spoon out. So make your cornstarch slurry right before you need to utilize it. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of honey. And I've got 2 teaspoons of cornstarch in there already. And we have 1 cup of corn syrup. Cranberry juice. I was looking at the honey and it's looking a lot like corn syrup, right? So we're just going to mix that in there. I'm going to slowly mix in it a little bit at first so that way the cornstarch isn't clumpy. And then just mix in the rest of your juice. We'll turn our heat back on. I just didn't want it to burn those little brown bits in the bottom of that pan. So everything's mixed together pretty nicely. And this is what we call deglazing the pan. So you're taking any sort of liquid or wine, anything really, and pouring it into a nice hot pan that meat has been seared with. Okay. So we're going to let that cook until it's reduced a little bit, and we're going to add some dried cranberries to the mix. And we have recipes enough for everybody, so if you guys would like to take some of these recipes home, please feel free. So we're going to need about 3/4 of a cup of the dried cranberries, and then once we get these in there, we will add, and it's kind of thickened up a little bit because of that cornstarch, we'll add some fresh tarragon and some fresh parsley, and that'll be our sauce. So we'll sit that on there. I'm going to throw the cranberries in right now so they have a chance to plump up and really kind of absorb that liquid. Sometimes I'll even plump these up with a little bit of bourbon. That's calling my name right now. So we'll stir that up a bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my cauliflower in the oven. And our cake is looking delicious. It's got a few minutes left. Stir that a bit. Can you guys smell this yet? And if you like black pepper, you know, you can go ahead and throw some of that in there if you feeling a little spicy. We're going to get our butter and our brown sugar going for our glazed carrots. So you just want about a tablespoon of butter. Now the timer is going off for the cake, so we will put a timer on for the cauliflower and check the cake, see if it's done or see if it needs a little bit more time. Now, because it's a sugar-free cake, it's really not going to brown all that much, but you see it's still slightly moving, so we're going to put it on for about at least 5 to 8 more minutes. Keep that in there. This sauce is bubbling up real nicely. It's getting quite thick. We're going to turn it down just a little bit so that way it doesn't get too thick too quickly. Cornstarch is a perfect thickener when you can't have gluten. It's really quick to thicken, and it's got a nice shiny, like you ever see the Asian food, like a teriyaki glaze, where it's got that nice sheen to it. That's the cornstarch. Kind of clean as we go. That's always a great idea. And our pork chops, we're going to throw back into this along with any juices that have come from the pork chop. So they're going to finish cooking in the sauce, like these few thicker ones. Those ones will definitely need a little bit more time in there, but we're going to coat it, flip them. Nice, gets all that juices in there, and that's going to continue cooking while we finish our carrots. So the carrots, we want a tablespoon of butter and 1/4 cup of brown sugar. So tablespoon of butter, put that right in there. Turn the heat on to low. And then our brown sugar, I'll get the measuring cup for this one. Carrots are one of my favorite vegetables. They're sweet. They're naturally sweet. So how could anyone not love them? All right. So our butter is already pretty melted. Go ahead and add our brown sugar to that. And this all is coming together really, really quickly. Our sauce is nice and thickening. I don't know if you guys can see the sauce. If you want to come up at any time to take a closer look, by all means. I won't bite. I might bite into some of the pork chops here in a minute, but... So our brown sugar is basically, you just want to get it dissolved in that butter. Put it on just a little bit higher. Get that nice and melty. And once you put the carrots in, that's going to create a lot of heat and moisture too to get that brown sugar to really coat it. So I'd say that everything's melted and mixed in nicely. So we're going to just add our carrots back in. You hear that little sizzle from the juice from the carrots. Just toss to coat. Now I want to make carrot cake. I do some carrot cake cookies that are delicious. It's like everything that's good about carrot cake in a tiny little cookie form. Mm-hmm. So you see how these carrots are very nicely, evenly coated. That brown sugar butter mixture has become kind of like a syrup. And they're done. That's easy. Put a little bit of pepper in there because a little sweet and a little spice never hurt anybody. All right, and those are good to go. Our pork chops are looking good. The sauce is thickening up nicely. I'm going to turn those to coat it once again. Oh yeah, look how beautiful this looks. It's such an easy, such a simple recipe. It's all come together in less than half an hour. Let's go ahead and check on our cake and on our cauliflower. Turn the heat off of the carrots because those are ready. Oh, they're soft and nice and sugary. Cake still needs a little bit of time, and I would say the cauliflower does too. I'm going to turn the oven up a little bit for that cauliflower. There we are. All right, and pork chops should be cooked to an internal temperature of 145 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and take the temperature of the pork right now, just to make sure that it is all the way cooked through. So you got an instant thermometer, either works. And of course, this is one of the slow ones. That's why I like digital. It's instant, you know? I think we live in a world nowadays that people like that instant gratification. But slow things are also good too. Good things take time, am I right? Alright, so these 2 pork chops aren't quite there yet, but the other few are, so I'm going to actually go ahead and start getting some plates ready to plate everything up. Get our other pork chops that are ready on that plate. And I'll actually slice these pork chops up so that way everybody can have nice bite-sized pieces. So while these finish cooking, we'll go ahead and slice these up. And then you really want to put your herbs in at the very end, or else your herbs are going to turn black with the heat. So with the tarragon, I like to just tear pieces off rather than mincing it. And we'll wait just a little bit more time for those to cook. But we'll put these in our little ramekins. Tarragon is so good. Has anybody not had tarragon? You've never had tarragon? No? Well, this will be a nice first for a lot of people. It's kind of anise, like anise taste. Some people compare it to licorice, but I don't, because I don't like licorice. But I like tarragon. And you like licorice, but you've never had tarragon. So, have you ever heard of Brittney's sauce? That has tarragon in it. It's an egg yolk butter sauce. So we really only need a few sprigs because we don't have a ton going on, but you can scale up or down as needed. Say you don't like such a powerful herb flavor, only start with half of the herbs. And you can say you don't like tarragon at all after you taste this, you can completely replace that with rosemary, thyme, really any of your favorite herbs would work. I'm going to pass some around so you guys can smell it, maybe taste a little bit. A little crowd work is what I call that. Alright, so let's go ahead and check on our chops. Oh, this sauce has gotten super nice and glazy. You see that? How it's really nice and thick now? That's perfect. And these pork chops feel perfect. Alright. So we're going to go ahead and add our tarragon. I'm going to put all of that in there. And then we'll chop up just a little bit of parsley. A rough chop is fine. Doesn't have to be Gordon Ramsay chef approved, you know. We're all human here, right? What is that? I own my own business, actually. So, yep, it's called Chef's Kitchen. I do private chef services. I do custom cakes and dessert bars. I do farmers markets. Oh, yeah. I've got a couple private chef dinners this week, and last weekend I was a part of a few fundraisers for local animal shelters. That has my heart. I'm definitely an animal person. Alright, so this sauce, You see how nice and thick that is? We're just going to pour it right over top. Oh, it's gorgeous, isn't it? And we'll have some in a little ramekin as well. And I can feel my watch telling me that the timer is going off for our cauliflower and for our cakes. So, I'm going to put that right there. Get our carrots on. These carrots are looking pretty delicious. I heard someone earlier say that they love their vegetables, so. And, to make it pretty, I'm just going to go ahead and take some more of that parsley and put it around the plate for the carrots, Add a little bit of greenery in our lives. So let's take a look at our cauliflower and our cake. Should be done. Oh, nice. The cauliflower is nice and browning. This cake is done. See how everything just turned out at the same time, just real lovely like? When you've been cooking for over half your life, it comes pretty naturally to me now. Oh, yes. Look at this cauliflower. It's got a nice brown on that. Look at that. Oh, looks so good. And let's test it just to make sure that it's cooked all the way through. Yep, nice and soft, but it's still got a little bit of texture to it. That's how I like my vegetables. So I'm just going to slide this whole thing right on that plate, right there. Let me come around this side. And once again, we can utilize some of these fresh herbs to top that with. And there is your pork chops with cranberry sauce, fresh tarragon, parsley, glazed carrots, and then once the cake cools down, we'll cut that into pieces for everybody. Anyone have any questions? Hungry? Yeah, hungry, huh? Well, let me get some silverware out. And we can get to eating.
One of the things that I really wanted to highlight about the meal that we did today is that I think it's a really great option for those holiday meals that you have coming up for Thanksgiving or December holidays. I really like that, as always, we did a balanced meal that had a really great source of protein coming from our pork chop today, and made it interesting with the cranberry sauce on top, which also brings in those holiday flavors. I also like that we did 2 servings of vegetables, one with the cauliflower from the Cauliflower Au Gratin, and then another from the glazed carrots, again adding those fantastic spices to make it interesting. One of the things that I wanted to highlight and why this meal works for kidney patients is that for the protein section, we picked a fresh protein instead of a protein product. So a lot of times around the holidays, we see these protein products come up, like our sausages or meats that have been, processed into something. But when we pick the fresh proteins, that's going to be much healthier for kidney patients, both on dialysis or with CKD, or those who have gone through transplant, just because this is going to be much lower in sodium. The fresh protein doesn't have any sodium added, so you get to be in control of how much sodium goes in. For our dialysis and CKD patients, it's also great because it's going to be much lower in phosphorus. When they make those meat products, they oftentimes add phosphorus to extend the shelf life. So when they make sausage, they might add disodium phosphate or phosphoric acid, and then those types of products would contribute phosphate to our diet and actually absorbs a lot better than things like the phosphorus in nuts and beans and in regular meat. So if you're someone that's watching your phosphorus value, opting for fresh protein options through this holiday season is really great. I also like that in our vegetable options today, we did the cauliflower au gratin. Potatoes are a staple, especially around the holidays. So a lot of times you'll see mashed potatoes or potatoes au gratin. The cauliflower is a really great substitute because it's going to be low in potassium. So it can be an option that you can go to instead of those potatoes if you're someone that's conscious of your potassium intake. I like that we added some cheese to it to make it interesting. Again, trying to watch our cheese and daily intake around the holiday season because that's going to be a really big source of potassium and phosphorus. But if we're adding just a little bit for the whole recipe, that can be a great way to get that cheese flavor in without going overboard. I also like that we were conscious of our sodium in these recipe choices today. So using the unsalted butter versus the salted butter, that can make a big difference, especially if it's something you're doing through the whole holiday season. So 1 tablespoon of the salted butter is going to have 100 milligrams of sodium. And so if you're someone who's restricting, that can really open up your sodium budget for other foods that you might enjoy more if you could just make that little switch. Also opting for things like olive oil or canola oil gives us those great healthy fats that we love. The baked good that we made today, the apple cake, didn't have any sodium in it. And that can be another place that sodium kind of sneaks up on us. So when we're making baked products, they might have a teaspoon or half a teaspoon of sodium or salt in them. And so if we can think of 1 teaspoon of salt would contribute 2,500 milligrams of sodium, which is pretty substantial. So if you can find those baked goods that don't need sodium, or even try taking the salt out of your baked goods, that could be a great way to reduce your sodium intake this holiday season. But I think the most important thing that this meal showed us is that you can still have those holiday flavors, the great spices and the cranberries and something similar to a potato au gratin, all of those flavors that we grew up on in a kidney-friendly way. So I encourage you to get creative, like Chef Brittney put out there, looking at the DeVita website. National Kidney Foundation has a wonderful recipe bank, and then also kidney.com has some great recipes. So take a look, see if there's anything that you and your family are excited to make this holiday season, and get creative with your nutrition. Thanks so much for tuning in today.